Every person in the world, every human being, consists of two different selves, of the nature self and the product self. What we see here is the product self. Mother Mary is the product self because she is attachment to an idea. And to be an attachment to an idea is the product self. In one word, it's culture. It's human culture. Human culture is the product self. The products of the products of the product self. That is human culture. We get born. Every person when they get born are the nature self, which is the non-self. We don't have anything. We're just a clean consciousness, a pure perception. We are the nature self. But then we have to develop the product self. The product self is the tool or the instrument, the self in the human being that we develop in order to communicate, organize and produce. So the product self is very necessary for people. We all need it. But we also need the nature self. Without the nature self we would die or go bananas. We would go crazy. Because nature self is the truth, so to speak, and it is what all Buddhists want, because they want Buddha nature, or they want prajna paramita, or they want enlightenment or whatever, or nirvana. And that's nothing but the product, that's nothing but the nature self. If you practice yoga in the complete ancient style, you will find the nature self, because that's what, at the end of the road, that's what a Buddhist wants. He wants the nature self. He wants to get away from the product self. And the product self comes when we attach to the idea of our self-produced selves, the product selves. So every person is two selves, two realities. One is the nature self, one is the product self. And for most people, the Buddha the Buddha represents the nature self, because the Buddha represents the letting go of attachment to all the aspects of the product self. Because the work of the product self is to attach to ideas and emotion, and this attachment is the manifestation of desire, and then it is samsara, and people throw away their lives in this attachment, in the product self. So for most people, the Buddha is a representation of the nature self. But many Buddhists are actually living inside in the culture self or in the product self, because they live in the attachment to the Buddha, as the religion, as something. So it's just to change one attachment with another, change one dogma with another, change one act of mental slavery, so to speak, one act of attachment with another act of attachment. So the Buddha nature is the same thing as nature self. The nature self is the same thing as Buddha nature, which we can find when we let go of the product self. But it's very easy to attach to this idea about the nature self, and so that becomes an aspect of the product self through the mere attachment to that idea. But basically, the work of the Buddha is to be a representation of the nature self, which also includes knowledge about the product self. I mean, how we act as attachment, how we act as attachment to ideas and feelings and emotion, how we act as aspects of desire, So if we want to free ourselves from the product self, then we have to be in the nature self. And we have to live in this balance between the two, because to cut away the product self is not possible, and to cut away the nature self is not possible. So we have to accept both and live in the duality, live in the balance between the nature self and the product self, between nature, Buddha nature, emptiness, and attachment to ideas. That is the two different realities that we have. And if we understand that we have these two, we can understand these two instead of being a slave of one or the other. So to understand both the product self and nature self is important, and will give us better balance and better knowledge about the world, about ourselves, and about humanity as a whole. All right.